Hey all, it's time for another book review, and this time I'm here to review The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. Now this one I started to see trending very heavily on Twitter and on Goodreads. A lot of my fellow friends on Twitter had already read and reviewed this, especially in the horror community. This was trending a lot. And I wasn't really sure because I kind of had a basic idea. I kind of knew it was a crime thriller type book. But it wasn't until I read this that I realized the hype is very legit. If you guys have not yet read this, and I feel like I'm one of the last few people to read this book because a lot of people I'm friends with on Goodreads have already read this. But like I said, the hype is legit. This is a fantastic book. This came out in February of 2020, and even though it came out in the midst of the pandemic, I think this book has done really, really well. Now, I've never heard of this author before this book. I haven't read any of her other books, but since I've read this, I have put some of her older books on my TBR. Now, yes, this is a crime thriller, and it can be classified as a horror because it does contain elements of the paranormal. It does fluctuate between two time periods of 2017, with the main character being Carly Kirk, and it goes back and forth between 2017 and 1982, and Carly's Aunt Vivian Delaney. And, there's this whole mystery in upstate New York. It's this little fictitious town called Fell, New York. No, it is not a real town that takes place in upstate New York. They mentioned Rochester and they mentioned New York City, but that's about it. There was nothing really given away when reading this that really told you what part of New York State this took place in. But that doesn't really matter. It's just kind of one of those matter-of-fact kind of things it's in the book. But it's interesting because there is this, one of the things about Fell, New York is this town that's kind of a sleepy little town. It had potential at one time, but now it's just kind of dead. There isn't much going for it. And there's this motel called the Sundown Motel, and it gets its occasional use, but that's not the weirdest thing about this town. Now, this town has had a number of murders, a couple of girls were murdered at different times, and this really sparks the interest. And, both characters want to know what happened to these girls, and why did this happen, and why are they not solved. The introduction to this book, you can tell that Simone St. James is a true crime podcast listener because she dedicates this to murderinos. And if you're not sure who murderinos are, they are fans of My Favorite Murder. And now I will admit, I'm not a big fan of My Favorite Murder. I tried to listen to a couple of their podcasts, and every time I listen to them, I always get that episode that's just them chatting and not really talking about any cases, so I kind of lost interest in their podcast and I gave up on it. But a lot of people assure me that it's a good podcast to check out. Now, I'm also a fellow true crime podcast listener. I listen to many true crime podcasts, so I'm definitely into this book. If you are someone who likes true crime or crime thrillers, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this book. The characters were somewhat believable. I'm going to say there were some instances where, some of the things seemed a little silly, but, it's very fast-paced, and it is something that will keep your interest. I definitely really, really enjoyed this book. I don't want to say, there were some twists and turns and some unexpected things that I just really did not see coming. The ending, I did not expect that kind of ending. Once you get some facts of what's going on with the events, you kind of know who's behind the murders and the disappearance and all that. You kind of have an idea of who the guilty party is. But once that's figured out, she kind of flips it and something else you totally do not expect happens. So that was the reason why I gave this a 5 out of 5 star rating on Goodreads. It's just so well written, and just like the use of the flashing back between the two time periods really was done well. I've seen other books where they flash back between time periods and it seems kind of out of place and disjointed. But Simone St. James does a really good job at connecting the two time periods and making it flow with the story to make the story more enriching and more interesting. Definitely, if you are someone who enjoys true crime or thrillers, even if you're someone who likes horror, but you're not really sure this is a book for you, I would definitely check this one out. For those of you in the U.S., I will have a link to Amazon down below to get this book for yourselves. I will try to include a link for international folks, bookshop.org. And if you don't mind donating $1 or $2 to my coffee link, I'm going to throw that down too. I appreciate all the people that have purchased things through my links or donated to my coffee. I'm not getting AdSense. I'm stuck at like 700 and some odd subscribers. I'm trying to reach 1,000 before the new year. We're going to see if we can make that happen, but it is what it is. That's all I got for you guys. This has been Dan. This has been another book review. Stay healthy and be good to each other.